It was the sound of his voice that froze me in place. I had just closed the iron gate behind me, arms full of groceries, boots crunching on the gravel path leading from the estate to the woods. The late afternoon sun was warm, but the air still carried that early spring chill. Then I heard it, a soft, hoarse whisper from beyond the pines. Hazel. My heart slammed so hard against my ribs, it felt like it might bruise them. I froze, nearly dropping the apples in my arms. I hadn't heard that voice in 5 years, not in dreams, not in old voicemails, not even in my worst nights of longing. William was gone, presumed dead, and yet I turned toward the sound like a woman in a trance, but that moment me standing there in the orange light, wondering if my mind had finally broken, wasn't the beginning. Not really. The beginning was quieter, slower. The kind of thing that creeps in while you're busy convincing yourself you're fine. My name is Hazel Moore. I was 31 when that day happened, when my husband, gone for half a decade, came back from nowhere and tore open wounds I thought I'd sealed shut. After William vanished, I stayed. I stayed in the small farmhouse outside Willamette Valley that he'd inherited from his grandfather. I kept the garden alive. I paid the bills. I cared for his mother, Emily, after her mild stroke the year following his disappearance. She and I clung to each other like two women stranded at sea, refusing to sink beneath the weight of unanswered questions. The town whispered, as they always do. Maybe he ran away. Maybe he cheated. Maybe she knows more than she's saying. But Emily never once blamed me. She'd hold my face in her thin hands and say, "He's still out there, baby. I feel it in my bones." So I worked. I cooked. I waited not with desperate hope, but like a soldier waits for peace, quietly. 2 years ago, I took a job as housekeeper at a private estate owned by Ms. Rebecca Linwood, a wealthy, discreet woman who didn't care about my past as long as I worked hard, stayed invisible, and could sew like magic. I was housemaid, seamstress, and sometimes personal assistant. The pay was under the table but generous. No benefits. No promises. Just cash, trust, and silence. Every morning I left the house by 7, walked to the bus stop, and rode into the hills to the Linwood property, hidden between vineyards and evergreens. After work, I came home, made dinner, prepped Emily's meds, and if I wasn't too tired, read whatever romance novel she had lying around. I didn't have a life, not really, but I had a routine. And sometimes routine is enough to keep you standing. That afternoon was like any other. I'd finished early, picked up groceries, and decided to take the scenic route through the woods. Halfway through the trail, I heard it again. Hazel. Low, rough, like someone trying to remember how to speak. I turned, just past the tree line. In the fading gold light stood a man, thin, disheveled. Hair longer than I remembered, face drawn, clothes filthy. It was him. William. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Every part of me screamed, he's real. He's here. He came back. But then came the quieter thought, why now? And why does he look at me like I'm a stranger? I didn't run to him. My legs felt rooted to the forest floor. Grocery bags hung from my hands, my mouth half open, tears already burning my eyes. He stepped forward slowly, like sudden movement might scare me away. His eyes searched my face as if trying to place it. Hazel, he said again, like it was the only word he could remember. The sound of my name in his voice broke something inside me. I dropped the groceries, apples scattering into the underbrush, and stumbled toward him. I wasn't graceful. I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around him. He didn't push me away, but he didn't fully embrace me either. His arms hovered before settling stiff at my waist, like he'd forgotten how to hold someone who loved him. Where have you been? I choked against his chest. Do you know what you've done to us? Do you even know what day it is? He didn't answer, just whispered, let's go home, please. so I took him there. We walked in silence down the gravel path, past the hedges I'd trimmed, the shed I'd painted, the wooden gate Emily and I had repaired last summer. When we reached the porch, I called into the house. "Emily, Mama, you need to come here." She stepped into the hallway, wiping her hands on a towel. Her neat bun framed a face that had aged too much in 5 years. She saw him and froze. The towel fell. "William." He nodded once. Her lips trembled. "I thought you were dead. I buried you in my mind 1,000 times. Don't come in here unless you're real." "I'm real, Mama," he said, and his voice cracked. She let out a strangled cry and threw her arms around him. For the first time since his return, I saw him cry. I stepped aside, watching like an outsider in my own home. That night, after the shock faded into silence, we sat at the dinner table. William picked at his soup slowly, like eating was foreign to him. Emily watched him without blinking. I kept glancing between them, wondering who'd ask first. Finally, I broke the silence. "Where were you, William? What happened?" He looked at me, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes. "Regret, maybe. Or guilt. I'll tell you everything," he said quietly. "But not tonight. I'm not ready." That should have been a warning. But I was too tired, too desperate to believe. I cleaned the table, put Emily to bed, set up the guest room, though we both knew it used to be his. When I finally lay in my own bed, I whispered into the dark, "He came back." He really came back, but even then, I felt it, that quiet, gnawing truth. Something was wrong, Dot. It took him 2 days to tell me. 2 days of stolen glances, shallow conversations, and silence over coffee. On the 3rd night, I handed him a mug of tea and sat across from him. The wood stove crackled, painting the walls in warm light. Fog had already claimed the valley outside. "Talk." "To me," I said gently, "I need to know where you've been. Even if it hurts, especially if it hurts." He didn't look at me right away. Then he nodded, like giving into something that had chased him for years. "It started at work." He said, "You remember the logistics firm? Things were falling apart, shipments disappearing, clients pulling contracts. The owner thought someone was leaking roots or stealing. I remembered how he used to come home tense every night, rubbing his temples, muttering about mistakes that weren't his. Then one day, he told me, my boss said to meet a delivery truck somewhere else, said it'd be safer. Gave me an address near the old industrial zone off Highway 23. My stomach nodded. I knew that place, the one behind the chain link. Lots, he nodded. I should have known better, but I didn't want to lose my job, so I went. It was late afternoon, sunny. I remember because the sun was in my eyes when someone hit me from behind. I shut my eyes, breathing slow, my heart racing like I was the one under attack. When I woke up, William whispered, I was in the back of a truck. My hands were tied. My head felt split open. They must have drugged me. Everything was blurry. My thoughts scrambled. His fingers trembled around the mug. I reached over and held his hand. This time he didn't pull away. They took me to a compound. I don't know where, deep, remote. No cell signal, no traffic, nothing. Just trees, fences, barbed wire. Greenhouse tunnels everywhere, like a nursery, but not the kind people visit on Sundays. He exhaled hard, eyes distant. They said I owed money and had to work it off. No time frame, no explanation. Just uniforms, orders, rations, and rules. I wanted to ask who they were, why they chose him, but I knew the answers wouldn't help. So I let him continue. There were others, men, women, some trapped there for years. They called it the farm. We couldn't talk much, but I met a girl named Ella. Her name hit me like ice. I tried to hide my reaction. I failed. She was young, barely 20, naive but sharp. She noticed things, guard schedules, where they kept the phones. One day, while distracting a guard, she grabbed his phone and sent one message to her dad. He's a doctor, powerful, connected. 3. Days later, the place was raided. And you? I asked. I was in the greenhouse. Saw the vans pull up, men in black storming the buildings. I froze, just watching, until Ella grabbed my hand and pulled me toward a car. Her father was inside. I tried to keep my voice level. So that's where you've been with her? No, he said quickly. They offered me a place to stay during the investigation, but I told them I wanted to come home to you, to Mom. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But there was something in his voice that didn't land. She risked everything, he added softly. If it weren't for her, I'd still be there. I stood up. I need to take care of the laundry. Wait, he said, rising too quickly. Don't go, please. I didn't tell you this to push you away. I stared at him, the man I had mourned, the man I had waited for. He was here, but pieces of him were missing, and I didn't know if they'd ever come back. I thought hearing the truth would bring us closer. Instead, it made the silence between us heavier. William stayed, ate with us, helped with the yard, sat beside me on the porch swing. But he felt absent, even when he was right there. No goodnight kiss, no warm touch. If I leaned on his shoulder, he'd stiffen like I'd startled him. I told myself he needed time. But deep down, I knew the man I had waited for wasn't the man who came back. It all unraveled the next weekend. I'd just come home from the Linwood estate, still in my work shoes. When I saw them, 2 unfamiliar SUVs parked near the fence. Inside, laughter floated from the dining room, warm, easy, like family. For a moment, I thought Emily had guests. Maybe Logan and Aunt Nancy. But when I walked in, I froze. A young woman sat at our table, beautiful blonde braid over her shoulder, holding William's hand. Beside her, a refined, well-dressed couple, her parents. William wasn't looking at me. He was looking at her. Emily turned. Hazel. Sweetheart, I thought you were working late. Apparently not late enough, I said, forcing a smile. William finally looked at me. Come in, I want you to meet someone. This is Ella and her parents, Dr. Charles Collins and Mrs. Ellen Collins, the ones who helped rescue us. Ella smiled with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. I nodded numbly. I don't remember sitting down or what I said. I only remember her hand tracing William's arm as she told the story of their escape, how he protected her, made her laugh. She wasn't being cruel. She was just being honest. And that hurt more than any lie. When the table fell quiet, I looked straight at William. Do you want a divorce? My voice didn't shake. His eyes soft with something like regret, but no surprise. I don't want to hurt you, he said. But it's worse to keep pretending. Okay, I replied. Ella looked at her hands. Her parents exchanged a glance. Emily stayed silent. And I knew the man I had loved was no longer mine. Stood, smiled politely. Excuse me. I'll start preparing Mom's medical documents for the clinic since you'll all be going together. I turned away before they saw the tears. Not because he left, but because he never truly came back. The days that followed were a masterclass in quiet humiliation. William stayed in the guest room. Ella and her parents came and went, always polite, always smiling, always speaking. To Emily in that smooth, professional tone that could hide cruelty under silk. They offered to move both William and Emily into a private medical facility outside Eugene. They said they'd cover everything, testing, rehab, even a full physical for William to be sure he hadn't developed anything in captivity. Emily looked overwhelmed, but grateful. William looked compliant, like a chess piece being moved without. As they doubt me, I made copies of the insurance papers. I scheduled the appointments. I labeled her medication and packed her belongings in a neat rolling suitcase. I kept my voice steady. I smiled. I didn't cry out in front of them. Ella followed me into the kitchen one afternoon. She'd taken off her shoes, walking barefoot like she belonged. She leaned against the counter, holding a glass of water, watching me stack medical forms. "You're really organized," she said. "I could never keep track of this stuff." I nodded. Someone had to. She hesitated, then said quietly, "I hope you don't hate me." I looked up. Her face was open, almost painfully young. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I'd like you to leave the kitchen now." She blinked, startled, then stepped back and left without another word. That night, I sat with Emily while she drank her tea. She looked older than I'd ever seen her. Her hands trembled. Her eyes were red. "Sweetheart," she said, "I'm sorry. I know this is wrong. I know how it looks, but William is my son. I can't throw him out." I nodded. "You don't have to explain. I get it." "No," she said firmly, grabbing my hand. "You don't, because if I were braver, I'd tell them all to leave. I'd tell William to wake up, but I'm tired. And part of me is just relieved he's alive." Her voice cracked. "I didn't think I'd ever see him again." "I know," I whispered. She looked at me with so much guilt I had to look away. "Not asking you to forgive me," she said. "But if you need time, if you need to stay a while longer, this house is still yours." I gave her a small, tired smile. "I'll stay until I find something. I won't leave you alone." "You're not alone either," she said softly. "At least I hope not." The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove to my old apartment. On the edge of town, the one William and I lived in during our first year of marriage. It had been rented out since then, but the tenants had just moved. My Aunt Nancy had been managing it for me. I stepped inside the empty space. Its cracked linoleum and faded curtains, and felt my knees weaken. I wasn't his wife anymore. I wasn't part of his future. But I was still standing, and somehow that had to mean something. The apartment smelled of dust and fresh paint, but it was mine. Nancy and Logan arrived 2 hours after I called. She brought linens. He brought a van full of secondhand furniture. Within an hour, I had a kitchen table, a bed with clean sheets, and tiny potted herbs, basil, rosemary, mint lined up on the windowsill. I hadn't asked for any of it, but they came anyway. That night, we ate takeout on the floor and drank wine from mismatched mugs. It wasn't a celebration, but it wasn't mourning either. "You going to be okay here?" Logan asked, scanning the place like he was already imagining. "How to improve it?" I nodded. "It's not perfect, but I need the space." Nancy smiled knowingly. "Sometimes healing starts with square footage." Around 8, there was a knock. Logan answered. His voice shifted, friendly but curious. "David," he called out. "Hazel, you remember my friend David, right?" I did barely. David had gone to high school with Logan. Now he worked as a carpenter, drove an old blue truck with sun-faded seats, and had a loyal dog who never left his side. He stepped in with a tool bag in one hand and a Tupperware dish in the other. "Figured you'd need curtain rods," he said, "and probably haven't had a decent meal in a week." I blinked. "How did you?" He smiled gently. "Everyone talks. I only listen when it's someone I care about." Nancy raised her eyebrows in that quiet matchmaking way only a Southern aunt could manage. I ignored her. David didn't stay long. He hung a curtain, fixed a drawer, and gave me a smile that wasn't expectant, just kind. After he left, Logan grinned. "He likes you?" I shook my head. "Don't start." "No pressure," Nancy said, sipping her wine. "But it wouldn't kill you to let someone be nice to you for once?" I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. But that night, lying in my old bed in this new version of my life, I realized something. I hadn't thought about William in over an hour. and that felt like progress. The next morning, I called Miss Linwood to tell her I wouldn't be returning full time. She sounded disappointed, but understanding. "You are always too bright for the back hall," she said. "If you ever need extra sewing work, call me. I trust your hands more than any boutique downtown." I thanked her, hung up, and sat for a moment, the phone still in my hand. I wasn't sure what I was: ex-wife, caretaker, tailor, nobody, but I was something. And I was moving. That afternoon, David dropped off a stack of flyers for a night course at the community college nursing. Assistant training, practical, short term, affordable. He didn't say a word, just left it on my stoop with a sticky note. "You've already been doing this. Might as well get paid for it." I laughed. For the first time in years out loud, maybe the road back to myself wasn't paved with grand reinventions. Maybe it was lined with curtain rods, Tupperware, and sticky notes. The first weeks in the city passed like water through cupped hands, messy, fast, impossible to hold on to. I took sewing projects from Ms. Linwood's clients' hemming skirts, repairing vintage blouses, mending antique linens that smelled faintly of mothballs and old perfume. I worked at the kitchen table with the radio humming, a breeze drifting through the open window carrying the scent of rain-soaked pavement. It was quiet. Lonely sometimes, but not painful. I signed up for the nursing course 3 nights a week, 4 hours each. It felt strange being in a classroom again, surrounded by women younger than me, older than me, and some just like me. People who had lived too much, lost too much, and still we practiced injections on dummy arms. Learned to check vitals, turn patients safely, clean wounds. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized something. I'd already done most of this before. I'd done it for Emily for years, quietly, without pay, without recognition. Now I was doing it with purpose, with pride. Emily called sometimes. She said William was doing well. The clinic was beautiful. Ella visited often, bringing books, vitamins, and soft music playing from her phone. I told her I was happy for them. Maybe I was, a little. Some days I hung up and felt nothing. Other days I cried for 10 minutes straight and couldn't explain why. But then I'd make tea, return to my sewing machine, and finish whatever was in front of me. I wasn't whole, but I wasn't broken either, just rearranged. David started showing up more often. Never too much, just enough. He fixed a leaky pipe, dropped off soup when I caught a cold, lent me gloves when I mentioned mine were worn. He never asked for anything, never pushed. He just showed up. One Saturday, I found a folded piece of notebook paper on my doorstep, a pencil sketch, my tiny porch strung with lights, a sewing machine in the window, and a cat curled on a cushion. Below, he'd written only, "Just a thought." I smiled so wide my cheeks ached. I didn't call him right away, but I pinned the sketch to my fridge. That night, I whispered to myself, "You're doing okay, Hazel." And for the first time in 5 years, I meant it. I wasn't waking for someone else. I wasn't living in the space between hope and grief. I was just living. Not all days were beautiful, but none belonged to him anymore. They were mine. I saw him again on a Tuesday. I just finished a practical exam. My backpack was heavy with textbooks. My hands still smelled faintly of antiseptic. And there he was, William, standing at the clinic's front desk, filling out a form. His beard was neatly trimmed, posture straighter. Beside him stood Ella, her rounded belly beneath a soft gray sweater, one hand resting gently over it. They looked like a picture from a waiting room brochure hole, expectant. For one breathless second, I wanted to vanish. But Ella spotted me, her face lighting with surprise. Then softening with hesitation, she nudged William. He looked up, and our eyes met. Silence, just for a moment. Then I smiled, not from habit, not from pain, but because I meant it. He started to speak, but I gave a small nod and walked past. Not cold, just Dundot outside. The wind carried late autumn leaves down the street. I pulled my scarf tighter and kept walking. The world didn't slow down. It never does. Dot at the end of the block. I saw him, David, leaning against his truck, holding 2 coffees. That familiar half smile. "You look like you could use something warm," he said, handing me one. I wrapped my fingers around the cup. "You always know." He shrugged. I listened. We didn't talk for a while. We just stood there, letting the moment breathe. For the first time, I wasn't standing in someone else's shadow. I wasn't leftovers from another story. I was here, present. "You ever think about second chances?" I asked quietly. "All the time," he said. "Especially for people who never thought they deserved one." We got in the truck and drove nowhere fancy, just out to the edge of town, where the trees glowed gold and the air smelled like pine dot as the sun sank behind the hills. I rested my head against the window. I didn't know where life would take me next. But I knew this. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for William, not for closure, not for permission. I had survived the worst parts. Now I was free to begin again, not as someone's wife, not as the woman who waited, just as me, Hazel. And for once, that was enough.